Human found the alien girl dying in a crash. Saving her meant breaking a treaty older than Earth. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. The smoke hung low over the clearing, drifting in soft ribbons through the fractured remains of the small starcraft, its metallic shell still warm from the impact. Ethan Cole slowed his steps, boots sinking into soil disturbed mere moments ago, his breath steady but tight as he scanned for survivors. The evening air shimmered with heat from ruptured panels, each faint pop and tick a reminder that whatever had happened here had ended only seconds before he arrived. His rescue scanner glowed a muted amber in his hand, pulsing with a life sign delicate enough to be mistaken for static. He tightened his grip. Not human. Not registered. But unmistakably alive. He moved closer, letting the world narrow to temperature readings, the smell of scorched electronics, and the gentle hum of his emergency beacon. A soft sound answered him, more like a breath than a voice. Ethan stopped. A figure lay half-sheltered against the bent curve of the hull, not crushed, not bleeding, but weakened in a way his training recognized immediately: shock, disorientation, oxygen loss. The girl's skin shimmered a cool blue-silver in the fading light, catching reflections from the damaged craft around her. Her hair, long and almost luminescent, had fallen across her face, shifting as she exhaled another shallow breath. Ethan knelt without thinking. The treaty flashed in his mind: no physical contact between humans and Xyrath survivors after a crash. Violations meant sanctions, court hearings, and long months of political scrutiny. But the soft tremor in her breath erased the warning as soon as it formed. She tried to lift her head toward him, not in fear but in a kind of resigned confusion, her eyes focusing slowly as if gathering strength simply to stay conscious. "You're okay," Ethan whispered instinctively, keeping his voice low and steady. He didn't touch her. Not yet. He watched her chest rise in a shallow, uneven rhythm, saw her fingers twitch against the dirt as she tried to anchor herself. Her surroundings told him enough: her craft had come down hard, but not violently, the damage was contained, the structure mostly intact. She must have redirected the descent to spare herself. Smart. Deliberate. Still, she couldn't move. And without help, she wouldn't make it through the hour. A faint breeze carried the scent of warm metal and pine needles, oddly calm against the tension in his chest. Ethan leaned in slightly, careful, letting his presence be steady, not imposing. "I'm going to get you out of here," he said, his voice barely above a murmur. The words came before he gave them permission. Her eyes softened, just barely, the kind of shift that wasn't trust yet but wasn't refusal either. The treaty might have been older than Earth itself, but as she blinked slowly up at him, that fact felt smaller than the quiet, undeniable truth between them: she needed help. And he was the only one here to give it. Ethan kept his breath steady as the fading light slipped behind the tree-line, letting shadows gather around the ruined clearing. The girl's eyes, still half open, tracked him with slow effort as he adjusted the scanner again, watching her life sign pulse faintly in amber. The rhythm steadied, but only just. The air felt cooler now, carrying the scent of pine sap and warm dust from the crash. He glanced at the sky. Temperatures would drop fast once night settled in, and even a healthy human would struggle here without gear. She would not last long like this. A soft hum escaped the remains of her craft, a flicker of energy cycling through damaged panels, the glow fading with each pulse. Whatever support system she had was shutting down, and the quiet around them pressed close, as if the forest itself held its breath. Ethan shifted his weight, lowering his pack, the straps brushing lightly against his jacket. "I need to move you," he said gently, watching her expression for the smallest reaction. Her eyelids fluttered. Not refusal, not fear. Just exhaustion. Her fingers curled faintly against the soil, as if grounding herself. He reached for his thermal cloak, shaking off the pine needles clinging to its surface. It unfurled with a soft rustle, the fabric catching a warm glint from the last bit of sunlight. He paused, knowing what contact meant, feeling the treaty like a weight in his chest. But the cold was already creeping into the clearing, brushing the back of his neck with a warning bite. Ethan eased the cloak beneath her shoulders, letting the fabric lift her slightly without forcing pressure on her. Her breath caught, shallow but steady, as he adjusted the edges around her arms. Her skin felt cool, almost chilled, and the faint shimmer along her cheeks reflected the lowering light. She watched him through half-lidded eyes, quiet and alert in a way that felt older than her condition. The treaty might have defined her kind as untouchable, but in this moment she was simply someone trying to stay conscious in a cold forest. "This will help keep your temperature up," he said, not sure if she understood his words but offering the steady tone anyway. The scanner beeped softly, signaling another dip in oxygen. Ethan glanced at the wreckage. The cabin looked intact enough to shelter them from the dropping temperature, but the door hung off its hinges and the interior flickered with failing lights. Still better than the open clearing. "I am going to lift you," Ethan murmured, letting his voice remain steady and deliberate. He slid one arm beneath her shoulders, careful to avoid pressure points, letting her body rest lightly against his chest. Her hair brushed against his sleeve, cool and soft like a ribbon of starlight. She made a small sound, not pain, just the kind of breath that comes from effort. He stayed still for a heartbeat, letting her adjust, letting her know he was not rushing. When her breathing steadied again, he shifted his stance and stood, holding her securely without gripping too tightly. She weighed less than he expected, as if her body carried something lighter than bone and muscle, something closer to air. The warmth from his jacket spread across her back as he stepped toward the cabin door. A soft breeze moved across the clearing, lifting the loose strands of her hair and carrying them across his chest like threads of silver. She stirred at the motion, turning her face slightly toward his shoulder, her breath warm enough that he felt it through the fabric. Ethan tightened his hold by a fraction, steadying her as the ground dipped beneath his boots. The cabin's dark interior waited ahead, its quiet hum fading into the steady rhythm of her breathing, guiding him forward through the dimming light. Ethan stepped through the crooked doorway, letting his eyes adjust to the dim interior of the cabin. The space was small, barely the size of a supply shed, but warmer than the open clearing and shielded from the chill settling over the forest floor. Faint lights flickered along the panels, struggling to stay alive, casting gentle reflections across the curved metal walls. He knelt slowly, lowering the girl onto a padded section of the cabin floor where the insulation still held some warmth. Her breath hitched as she settled, the thin rise and fall of her chest steady but delicate. He adjusted the thermal cloak around her shoulders, smoothing the fabric so it draped evenly. She watched him with half-open eyes, her gaze clear in a way that felt deliberate, as if she were trying to read him through the haze of exhaustion. "You are safe here," Ethan said quietly, though he knew safety was a fragile word out here. The air hummed with the cabin's weakened systems, a gentle vibration under his palms as he checked the nearby console. The screen sputtered to life for a moment, displaying symbols he could not read, before fading back into darkness. He exhaled slowly. No internal support left. She shifted slightly, her fingers brushing the edge of the cloak. The movement drew his attention. "Can you understand me?" he asked carefully, keeping his voice calm and steady. Her lips parted, but no words came out, only a faint sound shaped like effort. Yet something in her eyes changed, sharpening with a quiet intention that felt like acknowledgement. Ethan reached for his emergency kit, pulling it open with a soft click. Inside, the regulator patches and portable oxygen unit gleamed under the weak cabin lights. He worked slowly, methodically, ensuring each action was gentle and clear. When he brought the regulator closer, she tensed just enough for him to notice. He paused. "This will help you breathe easier," he said, lifting the small device where she could see it clearly. She watched him for a long moment, as if weighing the intent behind the object, then relaxed her shoulders by a fraction. Permission. He placed the device near her, letting it hum softly as it calibrated to the air. A faint stream of warm oxygen met her breath. Her eyes fluttered once, relief smoothing the tension in her forehead. The temperature continued to fall outside. Ethan reached for a portable heater, setting it near the corner where the insulation was strongest. Its soft orange glow stretched across the floor, touching the metallic surface with a warm shimmer. The light reflected onto her skin, turning the cool blue silver into something softer, almost luminous. She blinked slowly, her gaze moving from the heater to him, pausing with a quiet focus that felt like gratitude even though she had not said a word. Ethan sat back, leaning against the curved wall, giving her space while still staying close enough to monitor her breathing. For a moment, the only sounds were the low hum of the heater and the faint buzz of the failing energy cores in the walls. Her voice came softly, barely audible. Ethan. He froze. Not because she said his name, but because she should not have known it. He had not introduced himself. She must have accessed something in the brief moments he carried her, some trace or signal his equipment emitted. She looked up at him, the faint shimmer of her eyes catching the glow. You helped, she whispered, her voice thin but certain. Ethan felt the weight of the treaty settle on him again, heavier than before. Helping her was already more than he was allowed. Hearing her speak his name made it feel irreversible. Outside, the forest quieted under the night, and inside the small cabin, her breathing grew a little steadier, guided by the soft pulse of the regulator and the thin warmth spreading between them. Ethan kept his voice low as the girl's breathing steadied, the soft rhythm settling into the quiet cabin like a faint heartbeat. The small heater cast a gentle glow along the curved walls, turning the metal into warm hues that softened the atmosphere. She lay still beneath the thermal cloak, her eyes half open, tracking the light as it flickered across the ceiling. The air smelled faintly of warm circuitry and pine resin drifting in from the forest outside. He checked the regulator once more, adjusting the settings with careful fingers, letting the device maintain a comforting hum beside her. The numbers had stabilized. Not perfect, but steadier than before. When he looked back at her, she was watching him again, her gaze calm, almost curious. You should rest, Ethan said softly, settling down near the heater where he could keep an eye on her without crowding her. Her eyes blinked slowly, a small acknowledgement. The silence stretched comfortably for a moment, filled only by quiet machines and the gentle rustle of the cloak as she shifted her arms. Then her voice came, barely more than a whisper. Why did you help me? Ethan exhaled, long and slow, letting his back rest against the curved panel behind him. The question echoed in the small space, settling between them like a fragile truth. He looked at her, at the shimmer along her cheeks, at the way her hair caught small glints of orange from the heater's glow. You needed help, he said simply, letting the words land without weight. I could not walk away from that. She watched him closely, her gaze steady in a way that felt older than her quiet breath. Your laws, she whispered, her voice faint but sure, they forbid this. Ethan nodded once, the motion small but honest. I know. The heater hummed a little louder as its cycle shifted, warming the corner of the cabin more fully. Her breath smoothed again, quieter now, the oxygen helping her chest rise with less effort. She looked at the cloak around her shoulders, her fingers brushing the edge thoughtfully, as if trying to understand the gesture behind the simple warmth. My people say your kind acts only from advantage, she murmured, her voice drifting like a fading echo. Never without reward. Ethan shook his head gently, his gaze dropping for a moment before meeting hers again. Maybe some do. But helping someone who needs it is not something that should require a reward. She considered this, her expression softening in a way that felt like the first warm shift of morning light. You risk much, she said. Too much. Ethan let out a quiet breath that almost passed for a laugh. Maybe. But you being alive feels worth that risk. Her eyes held his for a long moment, something unspoken passing across her features, a blend of gratitude and disbelief that did not need words to be understood. The heater clicked softly as its cycle changed again. A gentle warmth grew around them, settling into the metal walls and the thin air. Outside, the night deepened, but in the small cabin's glow, she seemed a little less pale, a little more anchored to the world around her. Her eyes drifted closed, not from weakness now, but from rest. Ethan kept watch, steady and quiet, the soft hum of the machines and the warmth of the air guiding the long night forward. The cabin stayed warm through the deeper hours of the night, the soft orange glow from the small heater casting steady light across the curved walls. Ethan stayed awake beside her, listening to the quiet rhythm of her breathing, measuring each rise and fall as if it were part of the forest's own slow pulse. The wind outside pressed gently against the metal shell of the wrecked craft, carrying the scent of pine and cool earth through the narrow seams near the doorway. Arel stirred slightly beneath the thermal cloak. Not from discomfort, but from the slow return of strength. Her fingers flexed along the edge of the fabric, tracing the weave as if trying to understand its purpose. Ethan leaned forward, his voice low and even. How are you feeling? She opened her eyes a little, the blue-silver shimmer reflecting the warm light. Warmer, she whispered, the word shaped carefully, as if selecting it from a language she had not used in a long time. And breathing feels easier. Ethan nodded, glancing at the regulator beside her. The readings looked better now, steady rather than hovering at the edge of warning. The oxygen is helping. You should continue to rest. She shifted her gaze toward him, studying him with quiet clarity. Humans do not usually stay up to watch over someone they do not know. He offered a small smile, though the weight of it settled gently at the corners of his eyes. Maybe not. But I stay because you needed someone to be here. It is simple. She blinked slowly, her expression softening at the honesty. The heater clicked again as its cycle continued, sending a subtle wave of warmth through the cabin. Aurel exhaled, long and steady, the breath carrying a faint hint of calm. Your name, she said quietly. Ethan. He nodded. Yes. Mine is Aurel. She paused, as if measuring the sound of it in the small room. It means, the quieter star, in my language. Ethan let the name settle in the air. It suited her, he thought. Soft but steady. Bright even in exhaustion. I am glad you told me, he said, and he meant it. Aurel watched him for another long moment, her gaze steady. You carry no fear, she said softly. Most humans would fear my kind. He shook his head. I do not. You have given me no reason to fear you. A faint shift crossed her expression, something almost like wonder. She looked toward the cabin doorway, where the breeze slipped through in small currents, brushing the edges of the cloak. My people believe humans see the galaxy only through caution and suspicion. Not all of us, Ethan said gently. Sometimes we see someone who needs help, and that is enough. The warmth from the heater deepened, painting soft highlights along her hair as she turned back toward him. You speak as if helping is instinct, she murmured. For some of us, it is, Ethan replied. Aurel's eyes softened at that, the shimmer within them brightening in a quiet, thoughtful way. Her breathing steadied even more, the regulator humming softly beside her. She shifted the cloak a little higher along her shoulders and let her gaze rest on him, calm and certain. Ethan, she whispered, not with confusion now, but with intent, you are unlike what I was told. He felt the words settle deep in the room, carried by the warm breath of the cabin's air, gentle and sincere. Outside, the forest moved quietly under the late hour, and inside, the space between them felt changed, filled with something steady and unspoken, something that did not need any law or treaty to define it. Dawn approached slowly, its first pale light slipping through the narrow seams of the damaged cabin, drawing thin lines of soft gold across the metal floor. Ethan had not slept. He sat with his back against the curved wall, listening to the quiet settling of the forest and the even steadier sound of Aurel's breathing. The heater's glow had dimmed slightly as its cycle shifted with the rising temperature, but the cabin still held enough warmth to keep her comfortable. Aurel stirred beneath the thermal cloak, her eyes opening with a calm awareness that felt stronger than the night before. She shifted her gaze toward the cabin doorway where a streak of morning light touched the ground like a narrow path. It is quieter now, she said softly, her voice steadier. Ethan nodded, adjusting the portable regulator so the tubing lay more comfortably along her side. The forest settles at dawn. Everything slows down for a moment. She studied him with quiet curiosity, as if absorbing the cadence of his words along with their meaning. Her fingers brushed the edge of the cloak thoughtfully. Your world holds much stillness, she murmured. My world rarely allows silence. Ethan leaned slightly toward her, keeping his voice gentle. Is that why you seem surprised by it? Aurel nodded faintly. Silence, for us, is rarely safety. It usually means waiting for something to change. Ethan absorbed that, letting the weight of her words settle in the small space between them. Here, he said quietly, sometimes silence just means you are allowed to breathe. She held his gaze, her expression softening in a way that carried more understanding than the words she had spoken. The cabin shifted slightly as a breeze moved through the clearing, carrying the scent of pine and faint warmth from the early sunlight. Aurel's eyes followed the movement of the light across the metal floor. Ethan, she began, her voice contemplative, what will happen to you for helping me? Ethan hesitated only a moment before answering. If anyone finds out, I will be questioned. Possibly removed from service. Aurel's gaze sharpened. Because of the treaty. Yes, Ethan said quietly. It is strict for a reason. She considered his words. Your laws fear us. They fear conflict, he corrected gently. Fear keeps systems stable. Sometimes too stable. Aurel looked down at her hands, her fingers resting lightly against the fabric of the cloak. On my world, she said, we are taught that humans protect only their own. That you value your own security over the needs of others. Ethan studied her expression, calm and reflective under the morning light. Maybe some people do, he admitted, but not everyone. She lifted her gaze to him again, the shimmer in her eyes touched by the soft dawn. I do not understand why you chose to help me, knowing what it could cost you. Ethan held her eyes, letting his voice stay steady, the same quiet tone he had used since he found her. Because you were alone and hurt. That is enough. She inhaled slowly, a breath that sounded deeper than the ones she had taken before. The oxygen from the regulator hummed softly beside her, syncing with the quiet rhythm of her breath. Aurel watched him, her expression steady, thoughtful, almost searching. You stand against your own rules, she whispered. Not to break them, but to honor something else. Ethan nodded once. To honor what feels right. The morning light grew stronger, warming the small cabin. Aurel let her eyes drift to the narrow doorway again, her expression touched by something new, something close to trust. Your people say humanity is fragile, she murmured. Yet you choose what is right even when it is difficult. Ethan breathed in the cool morning air, feeling the quiet truth of her words settle inside him. In the soft glow of dawn, with the forest waking around them, Aurel rested back against the makeshift bedding, her gaze still steady on him, as if she were seeing the world in a way she had not before. The morning light continued to spread across the forest floor, soft and pale, warming the metal shell of the wrecked cabin in slow, gentle degrees. Ethan checked the regulator again, watching the steady pulse of its indicators. Aurel's breathing had grown stronger, each inhale smoother than the one before, and the faint tension that once traced her jaw had eased into something calmer. But as the morning settled into a quiet stillness, a low hum vibrated through Ethan's wrist communicator, so subtle he almost missed it. He glanced down. The signal light glowed in a muted pattern he recognized immediately. A long-range scan from the nearest patrol station. The kind that swept for unauthorized transmissions and crash signatures. The kind that should not get this close unless someone had suspected something. Ethan's breath tightened. He angled his wrist away from Aurel, masking the faint glow beneath his sleeve. The skin pulsed again, soft but insistent. Ethan. Aurel's voice came quietly from behind him, her tone clear now, sharper with awareness. He turned to her, keeping his expression steady. It is just a patrol sweep, he said, but the words felt heavier in the small cabin. Aurel watched him closely, her eyes narrowing with a calm understanding. They are looking for me, she said. And for whoever may have found me. Ethan did not answer, but the silence was enough. Aurel pushed herself slightly upright, careful with her movements. The cloak slipped from her shoulder, and Ethan instinctively reached out to steady it before it fell. She watched his hand, her expression unreadable, then let him adjust the fabric gently. If they find us together, she said quietly, your laws will hold you responsible. Ethan exhaled slowly. And if they find you alone in this condition, you will not survive the extraction. Her eyes softened, the shimmer within them catching the morning light. You would put yourself between me and your own people. I already have, he said, voice steady. Aurel looked toward the cabin doorway where the sunlight spilled across the forest floor in a widening glow. You should leave, she said. They will not harm you if you are away from this place. Ethan shook his head. I am not leaving you. Aurel's gaze moved over him with a quiet searching depth, as if measuring each word, each choice he had made since the moment he stepped into the clearing. Your people will ask where you were during the scan, she murmured. You could say you found nothing. You could say you never saw me. Ethan's voice was soft but unyielding. I will not lie about you to protect myself. The communicator pulsed once more, a soft vibration against his wrist, then faded as the skin moved farther across the valley. Aurel's shoulders relaxed, but only slightly. They will return, she said. And closer. Ethan nodded. I know. Aurel looked down at her hands, the faint glow of her skin catching the golden morning light. When she spoke again, her voice was almost a whisper. You chose this path when you moved me into shelter. You chose it again when you stayed through the night. Ethan met her gaze, seeing something in her expression that was no longer suspicion, no longer confusion. I chose to help someone who needed it, he said. That has not changed. Aurel held his eyes, her expression touched by an emotion he could not name but felt all the same, quiet, steady, and sincere. The morning air slipped into the cabin with a gentle breeze, carrying the scent of pine and fresh earth. Aurel drew in a slow breath and settled back against the bedding, her voice barely above a whisper. Then whatever comes next, she said, we face it together. Ethan felt the truth of her words settle inside him like a steady pulse, grounding and unshakable as the forest awakened around them. Ethan stepped toward the cabin doorway, drawn by a shift in the air so subtle it felt more like instinct than sound. The morning light had brightened into a soft gold, stretching in thin beams across the clearing outside. The breeze carried a faint vibration, almost musical, a tone too pure to belong to the forest. Aurel's eyes opened at once. She lifted her head slightly, listening with a focus that stilled the entire room. That frequency, she whispered, her voice a blend of recognition and disbelief. Ethan watched her closely. What is it? Aurel hesitated, her breath catching softly as the tone in the air grew clearer, rising like a distant chime. It is a locator pulse, she said slowly. From my people. Ethan felt his chest tighten. They found your crash. No, she said, shaking her head faintly. This pulse is not for a crash recovery. Her fingers brushed the cloak as if grounding herself. It is a ceremonial signal. It is used only for someone of significant status. Ethan looked at her, confusion weighing in his expression. Aurel met his eyes, the shimmer within them deepening. They are not searching for a lost soldier, she said quietly. They are searching for me. Ethan absorbed the weight of her words. Who are you? Aurel drew in a slow breath, her gaze lowering for a moment before meeting his again. I am not only a member of the Zyrith Legion, she said. I am the designated heir to one of our ruling houses. My presence holds political consequences. My survival or loss affects more than my people. The quiet inside the cabin seemed to deepen, the sound of the locator pulse threading gently through the air like a beacon made of light. Ethan kept his voice steady. Then your crash will be seen as an attack. Aurel nodded slowly, her expression shaped by concern rather than fear. If they find me alone, or find signs that I was left without aid, they may believe your people abandoned me. Or worse. Ethan looked toward the clearing, where the faint shimmer of the pulse flickered like a soft reflection. How much time do we have? Aurel closed her eyes briefly, listening. Not long. The locator signal is closing. They are moving quickly. Ethan turned back to her. Then I need to get you outside so they can see you are alive. Ethan, she whispered, her voice softer now, touched with something deeper, if they see you with me, they may not understand. They may interpret your presence as interference. Ethan paused only a heartbeat. I will take that risk. Aurel's eyes softened, the glow within them brightening with quiet emotion. You should not have to, she murmured. Your world has already placed you in danger by guarding me through the night. Ethan moved closer, kneeling beside her. Aurel, he said gently, you are alive. That is what matters. She held his gaze, her breath steadying with each passing second. I did not expect, she began, then paused as if searching for the right words. I did not expect a human to choose compassion over safety. Ethan adjusted the edge of the cloak around her shoulders, careful, steady. Sometimes, he said softly, safety is not the most important thing. The locator pulse grew clearer, a rising shimmer in the air that made the metal walls of the cabin hum faintly. Aurel looked toward the doorway again, the morning light reflecting softly across the blue-silver glow of her skin. They are almost here, she whispered. And they will want answers. Ethan drew in a breath, grounding himself with the steady rhythm of her presence. Then we will give them the truth, he said quietly. Together. Aurel's eyes softened in a way that felt like a shift in gravity, a recognition, a quiet acceptance. She reached out with a steady hand, her fingers brushing lightly against the fabric of his sleeve. Together, she echoed, her voice warm, and full, and real. The locator pulse brightened the air in slow, rising waves, each one brushing through the clearing with a soft shimmer that made the morning light bend around it. Ethan stepped out of the cabin first, letting the glow reach him before it reached her, the cool breeze lifting the edge of his jacket as he scanned the sky. A faint glint appeared above the tree-line, not a beam or a flame, but a smooth arc of silver drifting through the stillness. It moved with quiet grace, slowing until it hovered just beyond the clearing, its hull reflecting the gold of the rising sun. Aurel emerged behind him, leaning lightly against the doorway. The thermal cloak draped around her shoulders fluttered in the soft wind, catching the locator pulse and shimmering like distant starlight. She stood a moment, steadying herself, her eyes focused on the vessel above. The hum in the air shifted, lowering in pitch, settling into something almost like a breath. Aurel inhaled slowly. "They have switched to a recognition frequency," she said softly. Ethan glanced at her. "They know you are alive." She nodded, the emotion in her eyes quiet but unmistakable. "Yes." The silver vessel descended with gentle precision, stirring the pine needles on the forest floor as its thrusters hummed against the air. It hovered just a few feet above the clearing, creating a soft ripple of warmth that brushed across Ethan's face. A panel along its underside opened, releasing a narrow column of pale light that touched the ground lightly, like the soft glow of dawn. A figure stepped forward inside the beam, their silhouette tall and composed, their outline catching the glow of the locator pulse in a halo of pale blue. Aurel stood straighter, her breath settling into a calm, steady rhythm. "That is one of our envoys," she said quietly. "They speak for the ruling houses." Ethan watched as the envoy's form became clearer, their expression serene, their posture carrying something dignified and deliberate. The envoy's eyes shifted between Aurel and Ethan, lingering on the human for a long breath. There was no accusation in their gaze, only an unreadable calm. Aurel stepped forward, her voice steady but soft. "I am here," she said. "I am safe." The envoy bowed their head slightly, the motion graceful. "Your signal confirmed your survival, heir of Zyrith," they answered. "We are relieved." Aurel exhaled, a quiet breath of both relief and resolve. The envoy's eyes moved again to Ethan, thoughtful and searching. "This human remained with you," they said, their tone neutral. "He aided you despite the treaty." Ethan felt Aurel glance toward him. She stepped closer, her voice warm with sincerity. "He chose compassion without hesitation," she said. "He acted with no intention of harm. He preserved my life." The envoy regarded her words with a stillness that felt like a held breath. Finally, they nodded, slow and deliberate. "Then his actions will be honored," they said gently. "The treaty will not be invoked." Ethan felt the tension ease from his shoulders, a warmth settling into his chest as Aurel turned toward him, her expression softening with quiet relief. The envoy extended a hand toward her, the pale light shimmering softly around them. Aurel paused. She looked at Ethan, her blue-silver eyes reflecting the morning light and something deeper, something unspoken yet unmistakably clear. "Ethan," she said gently, "you changed the ending of this story." He met her gaze, steady and calm. "I only did what felt right." Aurel stepped into the light of the beam, then turned back once more, her voice soft enough that only he could hear it. "That is why it mattered." The beam brightened, wrapping her in soft luminescence. For a moment, her eyes held his, warm and steady, the forest quiet around them as if witnessing the moment in stillness. And then the light rose, lifting her gently from the forest floor, her figure drifting upward with the grace of a star returning to its sky. Ethan stood in the clearing, the breeze brushing through the pines, watching until the last shimmer faded into the morning light.